The fourth section of the psalm is verses 16 to 21. In Prophets and Psalms it says, "They have no spiritual nourishment, although they will have it through the word." And concerning the fourth state of regeneration, we read, "The fourth state is when the man becomes affected with love and illuminated by faith. He indeed previously discoursed piously and brought forth goods, but he did so in consequence of the temptation and straitness," means like confinedness, "under which he labored, and not from faith and charity. Wherefore, faith and charity are now enkindled in his internal man." This seems to be reflected in the psalm in verse 16, where it says, "For he, the Lord, has broken the doors of bronze and hewn off the bars of iron." He set us free from the state of merely doing things from compulsion and helped us begun to want to do the right things. However, the regeneration of the internal man, of our intentions, of our rational man, it's very important. It has to come first. That reformation is easier than the regeneration of our actual natural life. So here's a passage about that from the Arcana, 3469. "Man is regenerated as to the rational before he is regenerated as to the natural, because the natural is altogether in the world, and in the natural, as in a plain, man's thought and will are founded. This is the reason why during regeneration, man observes a combat between his rational or internal man and his natural or external man, and why his external man is regenerated much later, and likewise with much greater difficulty than his internal man. For that which is nearer to the world and nearer to the body cannot be easily constrained to render obedience to the internal man, but only after considerable length of time, and by means of many new states into which the man is introduced, which are states of self-acknowledgement and of acknowledgement of the Lord, that is, of one's own wretchedness and of the Lord's mercy, thus states of humiliation resulting from temptation combats." So, in the psalm, reflecting these temptation combats, it says, "The stupid, because of the way of their transgression, and because of their iniquities, are afflicted. Their soul abominates all food, and they reach even to the gates of death." But how does the Lord save us? The psalm continues, "And they cried to Jehovah in their adversity. He saved them from their anguish. He sends his word and heals them, and causes them to escape from their pits." Arcana Celestia 9987 explains about the meaning of the word. It says that in the supreme sense, the word is the Lord as to divine truth, or what is the same, that the word means the divine truth proceeding from the Lord is evident from Psalm 107, verses 19 and 20. A word signifies divine truth, and hence a law of order. In the general sense, a word signifies an utterance of the mouth, or a speech. And as a speech is a thought of the mind, uttered by means of words, therefore, a word signifies the thing that is being thought. And because of this, in the original tongue, everything that really exists and is anything is called a word. But in an eminent sense, the word is divine truth. for the reason that everything which really exists and which is anything is from divine truth. The word for the word in Hebrew is davar, davar Yehovah, the word of the Lord. So by the word, the Lord teaches us new ways to think about things, to think about ourselves, to think about our lives, and new ways to act. You could say it's the very best of cognitive therapy. The Lord heals us. As it says, He sends His word and heals them and causes them to escape from their pits. To escape from their pits, the Arcana says, means from their falsities. We read that pits are falsities is because men who have been in principles of falsity are after death kept a while under the lower earth until falsities have been removed from them and as it were rejected to the sides. These places under the lower earth are called pits, and those who go into them are such as must be, that is, who need to be in vastation. It is for this reason that by pits in the abstract sense are signified falsities. The lower earth is next under the feet, and the region round about for a short distance. Here are most people after death, before they are taken up into heaven. This earth is also frequently mentioned in the Word. Beneath it are the places of vastation, which are called pits, and below them and round about them for a considerable extent are hells. So this is saying that we're going to have lots of company in the lower earth after death. We are not alone. We're not unique. We're not uniquely horrible in the problems that we struggle with. And that sometimes we're going to need to be in the pits in this world and in the next world in order to be set free from our falsities. And the heavenly doctrine gives a specific example of the kind of falsity that people deal with in the pits, and that is the falsity of merit. Now, merit is a really interesting thing because the heavenly doctrine says that it's immediate good. It's a mixed good, a mixed motive that the Lord uses as a means, a step along the way of regeneration. Because we need that motivation. We need the sense that I'm a good boy because I've done all my work properly and I deserve a break and I deserve credit and the Lord will love me because I've done these good things and that kind of thing. And so the heavenly doctrine says that man is kept for a long time in a state of immediate good, including the sense of merit. So this lasts well into our lives, probably into old age, before we really begin to get it that all merit belongs to the Lord and nothing at all to us, and to begin to be happy about that. So in the meantime, the Lord is sending His word to help us escape from our pits. And so this verse of the psalm, or this section of the psalm concludes, "Let them confess to Yehovah His mercy and His wonders for the sons of man, and let them sacrifice the sacrifices of confession and recount His deeds with singing aloud." So this is this is exactly what it was talking about in the earlier passage where it says we have to be led into many new states, which are states of self-acknowledgement and of acknowledgement of the Lord, that is, of one's own wretchedness and of the Lord's mercy. So here is a passage about confession, and what does that mean? "For in the Word, with the prophets," we could say, and in the Psalms, two expressions for the most part occur, one having reference to the celestial or to good, and the other to the spiritual or truth, in order that there may be a divine marriage in every part of the word, thus a marriage of good and truth. From this it is also manifest that confession involves the celestial of love, and that genuine confession, or that which is from the heart, can only be from good. The confession which is from truth being called the voice of singing, the voice of them that make merry and that sing psalms. So we need to come to a stage in our life, which we do in stages, where, as we can see from this psalm, where it keeps saying over and over again, let them confess to Yehovah his mercy, where more and more it comes from both our heart and our mind, or you could say our will and our understanding, confession and singing aloud from good and from truth. And this is a new part of this particular section of the Psalms, that it adds the voice of singing as well as to the voice of confession that it's spoken of all along. So that's the fourth section of the psalm. The fifth section is verses 22 to 31. It begins with verse 22 that says, let them sacrifice the sacrifices of confession and recount his deeds with singing aloud, which we talked about in connection with section 4. This verse shows that it's all one psalm and all the sections are interconnected, connects the two verses together, two sections together. And it shows also that this new section has an emphasis on the spiritual, because it brings in the idea of recounting his deeds with singing aloud. The spiritual as compared with the celestial stage. Now, in Prophets and Psalms, it says that this section is about the following. When they were in knowledges, they were admitted into temptations and preserved. So you can see this is a bit more advanced stage of regeneration, because a person is now in knowledges, in concepts from the Word. And Arcana Celestia number 11 says the fifth state is when the man discourses from faith and thereby confirms himself in truth and good. The things then produced by him are animate. So discourses means he speaks from the heart. He speaks earnestly. He has conversations with other people about the things of faith. He wants to discuss and understand for the sake of life. And the things are produced by him are animate, means that he now has some real acknowledgement that this is not, his works and his speech are not matters of merit, and they're not merely matters of repentance because I have to, as they were back in the third stage. So there's progress. The Lord is leading a person into progress. And we see the exploration of the things of faith in a real way in the words of the psalm. It says, they who go down to the sea in ships, doing business in many waters, these see the deeds of Yehovah and his wonders in the depths. Apocalypse Revealed 4:06 says, ships signify the knowledges of good and truth from the word, serving for the use of life. Serving for the use of life. That these are signified by ships is because ships cross the sea and bring back the necessities which are for the natural man for every use. And the knowledges of good and truth are the necessities which are for the spiritual man for every use of it, For from them is the doctrine of the church, and according to this doctrine is life. Ships signify these knowledges because they are containers. And in many places in the Word, the container is taken for the thing contained, as a cup for wine, a platter for food, the tabernacle and the temple for the holy things in them, the ark for the law, the altars for worship, and so on. So we can think of spiritual container ships. We can think of spiritual globalization, where people are sharing spiritual resources by having discussions with their friends about the things that really matter for life. Can be for questions that come up in a marriage relationship. It can be questions about raising your teenagers and your young college, young adult children. All kinds of questions that come up as matters of life. So the next passage says, "They that go down to the sea in ships, that do work in many waters, signify those who intensely study the doctrine of truth from the Word. These see the deeds of Jehovah and his wonders in the deep, signifies that they understand the truths and goods of heaven and the church, and the hidden things thereof. The deeds of Jehovah, meaning all things of the Word that perfect man, all of which have reference to truth and good, and the wonders in the deep, meaning the hidden things of intelligence and wisdom." So you can see that these are people who are in a stage when they are in knowledges. And it said in the Prophets and Psalms summary, when they were in knowledges, they were admitted into temptations and preserved. So this represents a stage of life when new issues are exposed for us we hadn't recognized before. New questions of life come up in relation to different stages of life, new work that we need to do. And so the psalm talks about the temptations that then arise. It says, "And he speaks and makes the wind of the tempest to stand up and makes its waves high. They go up to the heavens, they go down to the abysses. Their soul is dissolved by evil. They reel and sway as one drunken, and all their wisdom is swallowed up. And they cried to Jehovah in their adversity, and he brought them out of their anguish." So speaking of these verses, Apocalypse Explained 4:19 says, these verses treat of temptations and of deliverance from them. The wind of the tempest, and thus the waves of the sea lifted up, signify temptations. And as spiritual temptations come through falsities breaking into the thoughts, which is the source of remorse of conscience and grief of mind and spirit, these are signified by the wind of the tempest stood, and he raised up its waves on high. Deliverance from them is signified by he made the tempest to stand still, that the waves might be hushed. Now it says in verse 27, they reel and sway as one drunken, and all their wisdom is swallowed up. And the Arcana has some interesting things to say about that. It says, they are called drunkards who believe nothing but what they apprehend with the senses. I'm inserting with the senses here. Nothing but what they apprehend. And for this reason, search into the mysteries of faith. In other words, they take it as a starting point. I don't believe it unless I can grab it. And therefore, the mysteries of faith are suspect. And because this is done by means of sensuous things, either of memory or of philosophy, man, being what he is, cannot but fall thereby into errors. For man's thought is merely earthly, corporeal, and material, because it is from earthly, corporeal, and material things, which cling constantly to it, and in which the ideas of his thought are based and terminated. To think and reason, therefore, from these material things concerning divine things, is to bring oneself into errors and perversions, and it is as impossible to procure faith in this way as for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. The error and insanity from this source are called in the word drunkenness. Indeed, the souls or spirits who in the other life reason about the truths of faith and against them become like drunken men and act like them, concerning whom of the Lord's divine mercy hereafter. Spirits are perfectly well distinguished from each other as to whether they are in the faith of charity or not. Those who are in the faith of charity do not reason about the truths of faith, but say that the thing is so, and also, as far as possible, confirm it by things of sense and of memory, and by the analysis of reason. But as soon as anything obscure comes in their way, the truth of which they do not perceive, they defer it. In other words, they set it aside. And they never suffer such a thing to bring them into doubt, saying that there are but very few things that they can grasp, and therefore to think that anything is not true because they don't grasp it would be madness. These are they who are in charity. So you might picture having teens or young college students or other people who are close to you who are full of doubts about the heavenly doctrine, full of doubts about some of the ways of life that you have loved in the new church, maybe things relating to the masculine and feminine, or relating to patriotism, or other issues where you can get to feeling drunk. Somebody's drunk, either me or him, and in the sphere of doubt, and maybe you come into a sphere of doubt yourself because you really want to be able to explain it in such a way as to ease the other person's doubt, and you can't figure out how to do that, and it makes you start to doubt too. Things like this happen, and they happen in so many areas. We can think that we really know our married partner, and we've known them for years and years, and then things come up where we feel like, well, where did that come from? Or maybe I've never been a very good married partner myself, and so forth. So, in many ways, evil spirits raise temptations and confusion in our hearts. But, as the psalm points out, the Lord rescues us. As the prophets in Psalm said, the Lord preserves us in temptations. The Lord rescues us from our doubts and confusions. And so, as one of these passages already quoted, it says, He raises the tempest to stillness, and its waves are hushed. And they are glad, for they are calm, and He leads them to the haven of their delight, a peaceful haven for their ships. Let them confess to Yahweh His mercy and His wonders for the sons of man, and let them exalt Him in the assembly of the people, and praise Him in the seat of the elders. It's interesting that this section doesn't end with let them confess to Yahweh. Like the last section, which added the part about singing aloud, this part adds, let them exalt Him in the assembly of the people, and praise Him in the seat of the elders. And the Arcana comments on this verse. Says that elders signify the chief things of wisdom, and old men mean wisdom. This is plain from Psalm 107, verse 32, where the assembly of the people denotes those who are in the truths that belong to intelligence, assembly and people being predicated of truths, and the sitting together of the elders denotes those who are in good, which is of wisdom. For wisdom is of life, thus of good, but intelligence is of knowledges, thus of truth. So the psalm is transitioning from the fifth stage, which is a state of intelligence in truths, toward the sixth stage, which has more to do with the wisdom of life. So that completes a discussion of the fifth section. Now we come to section 6, which is interwoven with section 7. Prophets and Psalms says, a song in praise of the Lord, that those who were of the devastated church have been rejected. And, section 7, that those who are of the new church have been accepted, with whom truths and goods will be multiplied. So the rejection of the devastated church is interwoven with the Lord receiving the people of the new church. This reminds me of Apocalypse Revealed 5:47 at the end, where it says, it is certain that the new church, which is the New Jerusalem, will come into existence, because it is foretold in Revelation. And it is also certain that the falsities of the former church are first to be removed, because they are what it treats of in Revelation as far as chapter 20. First 20 chapters of Revelation are about the removal of the falsities of the former church, and then comes the new church. The two things have to go together. And similarly, in our regeneration, the doctrine of life says, in proportion as a man shuns evils as sins, in the same proportion he does goods not from himself, but from the Lord. The first of charity is to flee from evils as sins, and the second is to do the good works of charity, which are to act justly and faithfully in all our relationships. Arcana Celestia number 12 describes the sixth state of regeneration, and you'll hear that it has both the beginning of the new church in it and also still combat against the falsities of the former church. It says the sixth state is when from faith and thence from love he speaks what is true and does what is good. And as he then begins to act at once and together from both faith and love, he becomes a spiritual man who is called an image. His spiritual life is delighted and sustained by such things as belong to the knowledges of faith and to works of charity, which are called his food. And his natural life is delighted and sustained by those things which belong to the body and the senses. On account of this, a combat arises, until love gains the dominion and he becomes a celestial man. So in the psalm, we have first the rejection of the devastated church. It's in the words, he makes rivers into a wilderness, and a land of fruit into a salty place from the evil of those who dwell there. But then the reverse happens in verse 35. He makes a wilderness into a pool of waters, and an arid land into outgoings of waters. So just in 3 verses, you have first the one and then the other. Now, Arcana Celestia 2708 explains the meaning of a wilderness. It says that it has 2 senses. In the word, a wilderness signifies what is little inhabited and cultivated, just sparsely you could say, and also signifies what is not at all inhabited and cultivated. And thus, wilderness is used in a twofold sense, where it signifies what is little inhabited and cultivated, or where there are few habitations, folds of flocks, pastures, and waters. It signifies what has relatively little life and light. But where it signifies what is not inhabited or cultivated at all, or where there are no habitations, folds of flocks, pastures, or waters, it signifies those who are in vastation as to good and in desolation as to truth. And now we can read from Apocalypse Explained, number 730, section 17, where it gives more of the details of the meanings of these two verses, 33 and 34. It says, "The rivers that are made into a wilderness signify intelligence from the understanding of truth and also of the word in its interior sense that has been devastated by falsities from evil." Rivers meaning such things as belong to intelligence, and wilderness meaning where these things are absent, and in their place are falsities from evil. The outgoings of water that are turned into dryness, or thirsty ground, signify that the lowest things of the understanding, which are called the knowledges of truth and good, have no light of truth or spiritual affection of truth. Spiritual affection means a love of truth for its own sake. Waters signify truths, dryness or thirstiness, deprivation of these truths from the absence of light and affection, and outgoings are the ultimates of truths, like the truths of the sense of the letter of the word. So this is saying that the church that becomes a wilderness used to have intelligence from understanding of the truth and of the word in its interior sense. Interiors always have to do with love to the Lord and love toward the neighbor. And they've also lost the outgoings, the ultimates of truth. They don't understand the word in its letter either. Apocalypse Revealed 5:46 says something similar about the meaning of wilderness, and it identifies the present day as a state of the wilderness. It says that by a wilderness is signified the church devastated, or in which all the truths of the word are falsified, such as it was among the Jews in the Lord's time, appears from Psalm 107. That such also is the state of the church at this day may be seen below. Such is the state of the church. The church is in the wilderness. Next we have Arcana Celestia 1666 that explains the meaning of the salty place. It says, "The salt sea signifies the falsities which burst forth from the cupidities or lusts. For there cannot possibly be any cupidity that does not produce falsities. The life of cupidities may be likened to a coal fire, and the falsities to the obscure light from it. As there cannot be fire without light, so neither can there be cupidity or lust without falsity. All cupidity belongs to some foul love. For that which is loved is lusted for, and hence is called cupidity. And in cupidity itself there is the love in question in its continuity. Whatever favors or assents to this love or cupidity is called falsity." So in other words, it's talking about the falsities are the justifications and the arguments by which what is good is made to look evil and what is evil is made to look good, and all those kinds of things. That's turning a fruitful land into a salty place. I can hardly imagine a situation that isn't more obvious than in regard to marriage at this day, where marriage can be a fruitful place and it's turned into a salty land in It's a lot of people's idea of what marriage is about. As cupidities and falsities are what vastate or lay waste man, that is, deprive him of all the life of the love of good and of the affection of truth. Vastation is described in many passages by saltiness. A church becoming a wilderness and a fruitful land becoming a salty place, it is of the Lord's mercy that the people of a fallen church lose their faith in and love for the truths and goods of the Lord's Word, because then they don't profane them. They're not interested in them anymore. They don't understand them. So they don't, it's not their fault to the same extent. They just turn away from them and they become pagans. They become people without any religion. So the Lord waited as long as he did to come into the world so that he could say on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. So then religion, God, marriage, honor, all becomes a joke or less to people in this state. On the other hand, this process of rivers becoming a wilderness also has application to people who are being regenerated, in this sense, that we come to recognize certain false beliefs and attitudes that are coming from lusts with ourselves that are not good. And then we long to be free from the bondage of those falsities. We see ways of life and thought that we used to see as being fruitful, and maybe even were to some extent fruitful in an earlier stage, we now realize are become barren as salt flats. And we're pleading with the Lord to set us free. So that now the psalm switches over to section 7, and the Lord is setting them free. It says the beautiful words, he makes a wilderness into a pool of waters, and an arid land into outgoings of waters. And there he makes the hungry to dwell, and they prepare a city of dwelling. And they sow fields and plant vineyards, and make fruit of increase. And he blesses them, and they are multiplied exceedingly, and their beasts he makes not a few. Apocalypse Explained 386 explains the meaning of these words is that those who are ignorant of the knowledges of truth and yet desire to know them shall be enriched and abundantly supplied with them. For Yehovah turns the wilderness into a pool of water signifies that in place of ignorance of truth, there shall be abundance of truth. Wilderness meaning where there is ignorance of truth, and a pool of waters, abundance of it. To turn a land of drought into a springing forth of waters signifies the like in the natural man. For a land of drought means where there is ignorance of truth. The springing forth or outgoings of waters is abundance. The natural man is the springing forth or outgoings, and waters are truths. There he makes the hungry to dwell, signifies those who desire truth. To dwell, meaning to live, and the hungry, those who desire. That they may prepare a city of habitation signifies that they form for themselves a doctrine of life. City meaning doctrine, and habitation life. That they may sow fields and plant vineyards and make fruit of increase signifies to receive truths, to understand them, and to do them. To sow fields meaning to be instructed and to receive truths. Truths are planted in our minds. To plant vineyards, meaning to receive truths in the understanding, that is, in the spirit. For vineyards mean spiritual truths. The wine of the Holy Supper represents spiritual truths, whereas water, for example, represents natural truths. Therefore, to plant them means to receive them spiritually, that is, to understand them. To make fruit of increase means to do them and to receive goods. For fruits are the deeds and goods of charity. I especially like the picture of a city of habitation as having a doctrine of life. It's having rules to follow, a road forward. It's a spiritual home. A city provides structure and protection for our life, a marketplace to do business, and also a court of justice. In ancient times, in the city gates was where, in the public place, the forum is where they held court and decided cases. So all of these things are embraced in the idea of a doctrine of life. And the holy city, New Jerusalem, of course, is the best example of the city providing a doctrine of life, a way forward for us in a place where we feel at home. Now, here's an interesting thing that the writings bring up in connection with these verses. It says, as with the Israelitish and Jewish people, all things were representative of things heavenly and divine, so also were the fields and their produce, likewise the vineyards, olive yards, and all plantings, as also herds and oxen, and the mountains, hills, valleys, rivers, and all other things that were presented before their senses. From this also it was that they were enriched with such things when they kept and did the statutes and judgments according to the promises in the word throughout, including here. So this is saying that when the children of Israel obeyed the Lord, kept his commandments, then they received natural rewards of flourishing crops and peace in their land, victory over their enemies, and long life, and that sort of thing. So there was actually a correspondence between their life of religion and their external life in the world. Now, it's different for us today. The Lord offers the Christian and new church spiritual, eternal rewards for internal love and faith in life. Still, it's got to be the case that as the human race grows up spiritually, morally, and civilly, the natural environment will also be blessed because we will be much wiser in caring for it and making use of it. The next passage, Apocalypse Explained 6:50, makes the transition back from section 7, establishment of the new church, back to section 6 again, where about the getting rid of the falsities of the former church. So it's explaining the words in verses 39 and 40. But they are few and bowed down from the constraint of evil and sorrow. He spills out despising upon the nobles and causes them to go astray in what is void, where there is no way or no road. They're lost. It's interesting how it goes back and forth between the states of happiness and a song and states of sadness. And isn't that like life, where we have our ups and downs and cycles that we have to go through in order to make progress to heaven, be led to heaven? So AE 650 explains, this entire psalm treats of the Lord's coming and of redemption by him, that they will then have truths by which the church will be implanted in them is signified by they shall sow fields and plant vineyards. That in consequence they will have the goods of the church, and thence truths will increase, is signified by they shall make fruit of increase, and by Jehovah shall bless them, so that they shall be multiplied exceedingly. That then every good affection of the natural man will remain with them, is signified by he shall not make their beasts few. But that otherwise they don't follow the Lord, these affections would be destroyed by evils, is signified by they are few and bowed down because of the vehemence of evil and sorrow. So again, we go through these periods, cycles where we have to recognize, well, if I don't follow the Lord, this is what happens. And sure enough, here it is happening again. And the Lord uses those states to help us be willing to be set free from them. And then the psalm ends, returning to section 7, with these beautiful verses. But he sets the needy on high, out of affliction, and makes families as a flock. The upright shall see and be glad, and all perversity shall shut its mouth tightly. Who is wise and will keep these things and understand the mercies of Jehovah? Families as a flock is a beautiful picture of love truly conjugal, with children growing up in a good state, a good home. Perversity, shutting its mouth tightly, represents no more voices of evil spirits yammering in our heads. Who is wise and will keep these things? This emphasizes that this is a free choice. Are we going to be wise? And wisdom, of course, is of life. It consists in keeping the commandments. And when we do, then we understand the mercies of Jehovah, the mercies of the Lord, both in the hard times of our life and in the good times of our life. We understand that the Lord is merciful in all things. So why did I choose this psalm for New Church Day? Well, I was led to this psalm by the little work called Prophets and Psalms, or a summary exposition of the internal sense of the prophets and psalms, because this psalm speaks of the new church several times. At the very end, for example, that those who are of the new church have been received, with whom truths and goods will be multiplied. The sending out of the 12 was to announce the establishment of the Lord's kingdom, that now the Lord's kingdom is secure forever in heaven and so on earth. Well, this psalm shows that the establishment of the new church and of the Lord's kingdom with each of us is the process of regeneration. It's really the same process. Through regeneration, the new church is formed within us and among us. We can really help our children and our friends to be new church if they want to become new church, if they want to be citizens of the Lord's kingdom, not hopefully in a card-carrying sense, but as real members of the Lord's kingdom, as people who practice repentance and seek the Lord's regeneration. Now, so some takeaways from this psalm. First is that we should have a Gentile's humility and love for the Word. Here's a little passage from True Christian Religion 387. An angelic spirit said to me, meaning Swedenborg, there is a palace here, which we call the Temple of Wisdom, but no one can see it who believes himself to be very wise, still less one who believes that he is wise enough, and even less one who believes himself to be wise from himself. So that's a real good lesson for us. We need to be Gentiles in spirit, people who know our own ignorance and are hungry for the Lord's teaching, so for the sake of our life. And then, with regeneration, the promises of the new church are fulfilled for each of us and for all of us, such as in Coronis number 1, section 53, it says, in this new church there will be spiritual peace, there will be glory and internal blessedness of life, as is also proved from the word of both testaments. Spiritual peace means protection from the hells, and it means good relations with your neighbors. Glory means enlightenment in the Lord's Word, being able to see this is the path of life, and that's not the path of life. And being able to walk that path gives us internal blessedness of life. And finally, this beloved promise from Conjugal Love 534, love truly conjugal with its delights is from the Lord only, and is given to those who live according to his commandments. Thus it is given to those who are received into the Lord's new church. So we live according to the Lord's commandments, then we are being received into the Lord's new church, and the Lord can establish love truly conjugal with us. So again, it shows that the establishment of the new church is the same process as regeneration. And Psalm 107, shows us some of the detail that's involved in how this establishment takes place. So happy New Church Day. I'll talk to you on Wednesday evening.